I wish I never rented that cabin in the woods. Lately, I've been feeling drained. I haven't taken time off work in 2 years. By some miracle, we just hired someone competent enough to take some of the workload off our small department. My boss suggested I use up some vacation time. I hated flying, so that limited my options. I didn't ski, so that narrowed down my choices to almost nothing. Was there really nothing local? Would I be doomed to spend 2 weeks doing nothing at my place? I started to mindlessly scroll through vacation suggestions at work. An ad for a cabin caught my eye. It was near the local ski resort but wasn't attached to them. The photos made it look almost too good to be true. A massive, cozy log cabin, empty and ready, waiting in the middle of a beautiful winter forest. And the price was good. I let myself think of sitting by a warm fire reading the backlog of books I've had piling up for years. Since I had no better ideas, I booked the cabin. By the end of the week, I had my bags packed. Driving down the one-lane forest road wasn't as troublesome as I thought it was going to be. The cabin's address wasn't on my GPS. Thankfully, the road was a straight path to my destination. I expected to see some wildlife on the way. Not even a small bird flew between the trees during the entire ride. At least it was quiet. The photos didn't do the cabin justice. It was far more breathtaking in person. I wondered how I got a location like this for so cheap. Someone had been there recently to shovel a pathway and remove the snow off the front stairs, but I didn't see any footprints. It took a few trips to haul all my bags into the place. I was glad someone maintained the walkway, or else I could have broken my neck. It was cold inside. I wasted no time turning on the heat and starting a fire. I then checked out the kitchen to make sure I had enough food for the week. I mostly packed snacks, so I might need to take a trip into town. To my shock, the pantry was stocked with a note saying I could help myself. Really, how did I get so lucky with this place? The drive hadn't been very long, and yet I collapsed on the couch in front of the fire. The years of hard work caught up to me. I made sure the fire had enough wood to keep it going for a few hours, then curled up under some heavy blankets for a short nap. My short nap turned into sleeping till the middle of the night. A noise dragged me out of my dreams. The fire had died down and my stomach hurt from hunger. I got up to get the fire started again when the noise came back. Someone was knocking at the cabin door. I froze, scared for some reason. I felt more tired than I did before my nap. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to keep away the chill. Should I answer the door? There shouldn't be any reason why someone would be in the middle of the woods at this time of the night. At first, I assumed the person who knocked was dangerous. Then I realized they could have just broken in and not knocked first. Still, I grabbed the iron fire poker before I went to the door. "Hello?" I called out. "Oh, hello, I got a bit lost. Can you tell me if there is a town nearby?" A female voice came from behind the door. My hand started to reach for the handle. Then I considered she might have a tougher male friend waiting to charge the door when my defenses were down. "Yes, there is one down the main road," I said, wondering how she got here if she hadn't used the only road up. "Road? Oh, I see your tire tracks. Maybe I could follow them." "Hey, are you all right in there, or do you need help getting out?" she asked, as if that question was normal. What the hell was she talking about? A fierce chill shot down my back. I opened my mouth to respond, but movement out of the corner of my eye caught my attention. I could see some windows in the living room from where I stood. It was pitch dark outside. A white shape started to appear in that darkness. My heart froze as a pale face got closer to the window. The ghoulish appearance was something made of nightmares. A wide black smile pressed against the glass. The dark eyes made contact with my own, then a loud banging came from the front door. I nearly jumped out of my skin. When I looked back, the face in the window was gone. I ran to where I left my cell phone. The damn thing refused to turn on. The banging still echoed through the entire cabin as my shaking hands plugged the charging cord into my phone. Still nothing. I then ran around making sure every door was locked. As I went by the windows, I briefly saw more of those pale faces outside. What the hell was going on? I noticed something at the top of one of the kitchen windows. I reach over to grab a cord. A wooden set of shutters slid out from under the wall and locked at the bottom. I'm sure if someone tried hard enough, they could get through the shutter, but at least it was an extra layer of protection. I found out all the windows had these shutters. The banging sound grew quieter each time I covered a window. I even ran upstairs to lock up the ones in the bedrooms just in case. While I raced around, I kept hearing that female voice offering help and telling me to just go outside. Like hell I would ever do that. When the last window had been covered, the noises from outside stopped. I soon found out none of the landline phones worked. My cell phone refused to turn on no matter what I tried. I was safe inside the cabin but trapped. Could I wait out whoever or whatever was outside? I had enough food for the week. My boss knew where I was going, so when I didn't come back, he would call the police. Right? I didn't want to wait this out for a week. I wanted to get the hell out of here now. I got the fire going again. A chill got into my body and down to my bones. I knew I needed to keep my strength up, so I ate some of the snacks while I sat shaking on the couch, iron fire poker within arm's reach. For some reason, I started to feel exhausted. Soon I couldn't keep my eyes open and fell asleep, even though I was still scared out of my mind. I woke up in a cold cabin. I couldn't tell what time it was. There were no clocks, and my phone was still dead. I didn't dare risk opening the shutters to see what time of day it was outside. I've never felt this cold in my life. I piled on layers of clothing. Not even the fireplace or turning the heat up to the max helped get rid of the chill. A scratchy feeling came to the back of my throat. I was getting sick on top of everything else. I needed to warm up. To my disappointment, the shower only had slightly warm water. I almost felt colder after a quick shower. My stomach churned. The snacks from the night before weren't sitting well. I tried to make a can of soup, but my body rejected it. I found my way back to the couch and under a pile of blankets. I felt awful. In the short time since I'd woken up, my health did a major downward spiral. Soon I felt too sick to do anything but sleep for another few hours. What time was it when I woke back up? I had no idea. A soft knocking sound made me stir. I heard a low voice but couldn't make out what they were saying. Slowly, I started towards the door. My body hurt too much from fever and chills to pick up my weapon. "You need to get out of there," the female voice from before whispered. "Come out here, I'll help you." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. "Don't lie. I know you have others with you," I hissed, my voice raspy from my illness. "Others? Is that what you saw? You sound awful. I don't know if you'll last more than a day or so inside there." What was she talking about? Was she suggesting that somehow I was sick because I was inside the cabin? No, she was just trying to say anything to get me outside, but still, I wanted to trust her because I was scared. I crept to the nearest window to unlock the shutter. I opened it just enough to see out of. My eyes hurt from the blinding snow outside. When they adjusted to the light, I started to scan the trees looking for any signs of the creatures from last night. There weren't any tracks in the snow. Had I just been seeing things? A dark shape moved from between the trees, then another. More appeared somehow aware I was looking outside. Within seconds, countless twisted and misshapen human forms started to come from the forest. Some were dragged behind the bodies of animals they killed, the monsters' mouths covered with blood. If I went outside, I would be eaten next. Suddenly, a human face appeared just outside the window. A young woman with green eyes and red hair smiled at me. For a moment, the fear left. She looked so friendly, I almost considered going outside with her. Then, her wide smile started to get wider. I slammed the shutter down, locking it. I didn't know what those monsters were, or why they hadn't gotten inside yet. For now, I was safe inside the cabin. The horrors were outside, and they needed to stay like that. The girl pleaded with me to come outside. I tried to ignore her. The illness started to get worse. Soon I found myself unable to stand for long. I once again made my way to my safe space on the couch. My mind was muddled with a sudden fever, making it impossible to think. Before I passed out, I heard the girl outside speak once more. "I'll somehow get you out here." How long did I sleep? I didn't know. I couldn't move. My throat hurt. My body hurt. I could barely keep my eyes open. Was this how I died? Alone in the middle of nowhere? I didn't even like cabins, so why did I come here? I could have read all those books at home. Another banging noise woke me. This time it was different. I also smelled smoke, but I didn't remember the last time I got up to add to the fire. A burst of energy came to my body as I stood up, trying to understand what was happening. To my horror, I saw smoke pouring out from through the shutters. I quickly realized the cabin was on fire. The flames hadn't reached inside yet, but if I didn't get out soon, I would die from the smoke. I coughed, the air quickly becoming dense. I started to make my way to the front door, but then my body stopped. For some reason, I couldn't control my actions. A groaning sound came from the walls. It almost sounded like a scream. Tears stung my eyes as I was forced to watch my body move away from freedom. I ended up in the kitchen. Someone else was there. It was hard to see her full features because of the thick air. She was coughing as well. "Come on, you'll die in here," she shouted. The back door had been busted open. She held a large hammer in her hand, showing how she'd gotten in. I took a few steps closer, but my hand moved on its own. In one swift movement, I grabbed a knife off the counter and attacked her with it. She backed up, but I still sliced a deep cut across her left eye. I wanted to stop. I didn't want to hurt her. Blood flowed from her wound and to the floor. For some reason, the wood absorbed the liquid, leaving no traces. "Sorry about this," she said, and raised the hammer. The last thing I remember inside that cabin was a shock of pain against my temple. I woke up again, cold and throat raw. My body refused to stop shaking, but the fever was gone. I was very weak. For some odd reason, I sat in my car, the cabin in front fully engulfed in flames. A screaming sound came from the building, and I could have sworn I saw a burst of dark smoke come from the flames flying off deep into the woods. I called the police. Just hold on till then. I looked over to see the redhead taking off her jacket to wrap it around my shaking body. I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. She helped me get a sip of water from a bottle she brought along. Her left eye closed from the wound I had given her. "I'm sorry," I croaked. "Don't worry about it. My eye is fine, and I'll have a neat scar," she replied with a smile. "The cabin," I started, then coughed. "Yeah, it was draining your life force and stuff like that. I'm glad I got to you in time. You'll recover in a few weeks. Anyway, I gotta go. Later, Gator." I couldn't stop her. I wanted to thank her, or to find out her name, but she left, not wanting to stick around for when the police showed up. I was admitted to the hospital. When I was able, there was a round of questioning. I didn't have a lot of answers. There was a shell of a burned-down cabin, but there hadn't been any registered in the area. The road that led to the cabin disappeared before the police showed up. It was a miracle they got through the woods to find me. I said I had rented the cabin through an online ad, but there hadn't been any charge on my credit card, and I couldn't find the ad again. They were puzzled but lacked any clues to go forward. I've heard whispers that people had started to disappear inside those woods. A year ago, 2 bodies had been found inside the shell of a house that should not have been in the forest. They had been within walking distance of a town. No one understood why they let themselves starve to death inside an abandoned home. I needed a few weeks off work to recover. At least my boss was good about it. I was thankful I had lived through the worst vacation anyone could ever take, but not having answers bothered me. I really wanted to thank that strange girl who saved me. I wanted to tell my story mostly to warn others there was something unnatural lurking off in the forest. There are some dark things in this world, and there are some decent people too. Let's hope you never come across darkness without some light appearing to guide your way out. My father's cabin in the woods burned down. We found something strange in the ruins. So my father used to own a cabin. In fact, he used to own a lot of different properties, which I suppose is just a roundabout way of saying that we grew up with money. Where things get a bit complicated is how he actually made that money. The line that he constantly fed us was that he was an accountant running his own firm in an office in the city. Long hours, lots of business trips. We never saw him much, and whenever we did, he always seemed tired, his eyes perpetually bloodshot, as if he were always trying to force them to stay open. He was sent off to prison right after I'd finished my first year of college. The sentence? 15 years for washing hundreds of millions of dollars for numerous cartels. 2 weeks after he'd been booked, my mother committed suicide. As it turns out, she'd been helping him out through the entire thing and was facing some time herself. I guess she didn't want to deal with all that and took the drastic way out. A few months later, the government had seized pretty much all his property. All of it, except for that cabin in the woods. It took a long time for me to feel normal again, but eventually I managed it, went back to school, and graduated with a good enough GPA which allowed me to snag some shitty office job a few months later, but it was enough to pay the bills. Fast forward about another year, and I've basically scrubbed that entire sequence of events out of my brain. It took a little bit of therapy, a lot of psychedelics, but I finally did it, to the point where I was comfortable enough to go back to that cabin, the one place where I'd see my father for more than a few weeks at a time during our summer trips. I decided to take along 3 of my friends from uni, Jack, Pedro, Randy. We drove down there at the beginning of May. The road leading to the cabin hadn't been maintained at all, and as a result, it had become borderline undrivable. I decided to save my vehicle the stress and parked in a nearby lot, leaving us about a 1.5-mile trek through the woods, which really wasn't so bad. Our time in the cabin was pretty much spent getting drunk and stoned, and by the 3rd night we had completely run out of food. We decided to take the 30-minute walk over to the nearest rest stop, where I knew that there was a 24/7 diner. So we go there, eat our meals, and, on our way back, we notice a burning smell in the woods, as if there was a bonfire raging about nearby. Of course, that was a bit strange given that it was around 2 a.m., but we didn't think too much of it at the time and we kept walking. It was only when the smell continued to grow stronger as we got closer to the cabin that we understood something was very wrong. Soon it had become suffocating, and we could see the night sky tinged with orange in the near distance. I felt my heart drop into my stomach, and immediately I was sprinting. My worst fear realized as I reached the clearing where the cabin was located. Completely up in flames, plumes of dark smoke blending in with the night. It was a mix of different emotions that hit me all at once, the combination of them creating a sense of dread so deep I hadn't thought it possible. After reeling myself in, I called 911, with the operator telling me that the fire department would be on their way, but wouldn't be able to reach us for at least 30 minutes. The four of us walked away from the cabin in silence, getting far enough so that the smoke was no longer scratching at our throats. Around 10 minutes later, we noticed that the orange tinge in the sky had suddenly disappeared. And I mean suddenly, like gone in a single blink. I thought I might have been hallucinating, but it was clear from their expressions that my friends were seeing something similar. Cautiously, we started making our way back towards the cabin, noticing that the smoke was no longer heavy in the air, having cleared up considerably. Once we reached the clearing, it had disappeared altogether. I looked ahead, my brain working overtime to comprehend the sight before me. The cabin was no longer on fire, burnt to a crisp, sure, but the raging, overwhelming flames that had been consuming it just minutes prior had somehow completely fizzled out. The four of us looked between each other as if to confirm we were all still seeing the same thing. Using the flashlight on my phone to survey the damage, I found pretty much what I'd expected. Complete destruction. Absolutely zero hope of recovering anything. I started taking some deep breaths, trying to calm myself down, when I heard Pedro yelling out from the other side, "Guys, where the fuck did this thing come from?" We all walked over to him. Nestled in the debris was the corpse of something, a monstrosity. It was about the size of a bear, with the sections of its body that weren't burnt showing pale, clammy skin with deep cuts etched throughout it in what looked to be some kind of crude pattern. Its head had been smashed in, leaving nothing but an abnormally wide bottom jaw, which was still bearing long black teeth. It had an uncountable number of long, thick arms that it was using to hold something that resembled a human infant, one that appeared to be completely unscathed, devoid of any burn marks. The longer I stared at it, the more that I was convinced I could see it breathing. It was a bizarre enough sight to put us into a near trance. What eventually snapped us out of it was the chanting. It was barely noticeable at first, slowly escalating in pitch until it was clear that there were several human voices shouting in unison. Their tones were animalistic, their words strung together with just the bare beginnings of a rhythm. It sounded like they were speaking English, though I could hardly make out anything they were saying. The strangest part, though, was how quickly it was getting closer to us. Definitely not a walking pace. It was more like a sprint. The four of us shared a quick glance between each other, and immediately there was an understanding. We ran like bats out of hell, tripping over branches, our own feet. But eventually we reached my car, all of us scrambling to pile into it. As I was fumbling for my keys, the chanting had become deafening, to a point that hardly made sense. It sounded as if there were speakers lined up in a circle around us, all blasting that horrible noise. And the second that I had put the keys into the ignition, things went silent. I found myself holding my breath as I looked up, my eyes slowly adjusting to the darkness until what I was seeing was unmistakable. Several figures standing completely still at the edge of the woods, all human-shaped but far too large to be people. All the air being held in my lungs flooded out with one big exhale, and I slammed the vehicle into drive and took a sharp turn before speeding the hell out of there, Refusing to look in the rear view until we had made it into the highway, I drove until I had reached the rest stop, which was now hosting an absurd number of police cars. I parked, got out, and approached one of the cops, asking if they were here because of the fire. The cop shook his head.
Fire? No. Has there been a fire?
I explained the situation with the cabin to him, deciding to leave out the creature and the chanting for the time being. The cop nodded slowly, his expression remaining largely the same throughout.
All right,
He said.
we'll look into it, and then give you an update in the morning. For tonight, just get a hotel or something.
We exchanged numbers and I thanked him. As I began to walk away, he called out to me.
Hey, can I ask you something?
I turned back around. Yeah, I said. Sure.
Do you happen to be
My dad's name's...
son?
For a while I just stared at him. Eventually I nodded.
Yeah,
He said.
I thought I recognized you.
I don't understand, I told him. I've never seen you before. The cop took a deep breath before taking a quick look around.
Come here.
He said.
Come close.
Tentatively, I did so.
I can't tell you everything. I don't even know everything. But I think you should have the right to know the truth about your father. All of the stuff that's happened here tonight, all of the shit that you've seen, it has something to do with him.
He took another look around before continuing.
Cartels, right? Was that the story they told you? It's not so creative, but I guess it doesn't have to be creative to be believable, 'cause the shit that he was actually mixed up in, you would not believe unless you've seen it for yourself.
What the hell are you talking about? I asked.
Look, I have your number. I'll be in touch tomorrow morning. This is something I'm curious about as well. Maybe you can give me some answers, point me in the right directions, but not here. So get out of here before people start noticing you, and stay safe.
I didn't feel like staying in a hotel that night, so I drove back into the city, dropping everybody off before arriving back at my own apartment. Of course, I couldn't sleep that night, my eyes wired open into the morning as I waited for the officer to call. He still hadn't by the time that noon rolled around, and so I tried calling him instead. No answer. Eventually, I did receive a call from the police, telling me that my father's cabin had burned down and that it was due to a forest fire. I told them that wasn't possible because there had been no forest fire and that I suspected foul play and wanted it to be investigated.
It's already been investigated.
Are the exact words that the officer told me.
Don't worry about it. Just get in touch with insurance. Go over your options.
And before I could say anything else, he had hung up on me. It was a mixture of anger and curiosity that compelled me to drive back down there. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't for the road leading towards the rest stop to be blocked altogether. There were 2 cop cars guarding the barrier, with a single officer signaling any vehicles approaching to turn around. I pulled over to the side of the road, and after some careful deliberation, I decided to get out and approach him and ask what was going on, just to see what he might say. When I finished the question, he stared at me for a long time, uncomfortably long. Emergency construction is what he eventually told me. After that encounter, I pretty much dropped trying to figure things out. Some weird things have started happening to me since. Every night, I swear I can hear a baby crying in the apartment across from mine. The apartment that I thought had been occupied by a pair of college kids who definitely do not have children. That cop that was supposed to call me finally did, a few nights ago. When I answered, I was met with dead silence on the other end. Nearly 30 seconds of it, until the line clicked dead. There's an abandoned house sitting across the street from my apartment building, one that's supposedly been there for years because the development of the store meant to take its place keeps getting delayed. Somebody has started staring at me through its second-floor window. Whenever I catch them doing it, they're quick to close the blinds, so I can never catch any details. But I know that the moment I turn away from it, their eyes are back on me. I can't confirm that any of these things are related, whether it has anything to do with my father. I just know that I don't want to deal with it and that I want it to end. My grandma died and passed down her secluded cabin in the woods to my brother and I. To us, though, it's filled with old nightmares. My grandmother passed away last month, but nobody found her corpse until a week ago. Hazards of living out in the mountains, I suppose. My uncle couldn't believe it. He'd been driving her groceries and supplies once a month, and according to the coroner's report, she'd died a day after he'd left. What are the chances? To hear him tell it, she was just fine when he'd driven away too, spry as she'd ever been. She was even getting her own water from the river and doing a bit of fishing on the side. And then, poof, deceased. Griff, her golden retriever, was gone now too. My uncle thought he probably took off after realizing Grandma wasn't waking up. Maybe got hungry and went off chasing squirrels in the woods or something. My uncle strolled about and called Griff's name for hours after he'd found Grandma, looking in all his usual hiding spots, but had no luck. My opinion? Griff probably got as far away as he could. After the funeral, my brother and I offered to come up and help our uncle clean up her things, or at least my brother did, and I got guilt-tripped along for the ride. Apparently, she left the cabin to the two of us in her will. Split custody, not that either of us wanted it. We'd more than had our fill of memories out there. That said, it was a nice day to tidy up a dead woman's things. The summer sun shone bright and there wasn't so much as a cloud in the sky. Overhead, sparrows darted between the towering pine trees, flitting around the cabin's small clearing, while they sang their bird song. "I'm gonna bring this stuff down the mountain and head in for the night," Uncle Jake said, gesturing to his pickup truck full of Grandma's furniture. "You two gonna take off soon, or spend the night?" He looked like the spitting image of a mountain man, standing there with his tree trunk arms and red flannel shirt. The beard was the cherry on top. "We'll be heading out soon," I said. "Don't worry about us. The car got us up here just fine. It'll get us back down." Uncle Jake was suspicious of any vehicle that didn't have a cargo bed. "Sure thing, boys. Take it easy now." He hopped into the cab of the pickup and slammed the door with a metal clang. A moment later, the engine turned over and the mountain air was replaced with the thick smell of diesel and rust. With a rumble, the truck rolled out of the cabin's dirt driveway, bobbed down the makeshift road, and disappeared to the faint riffs of AC/DC's Thunderstruck. "Stay the night," my brother Eric said, snickering, as if we'd spend a night in this hellhole. Eric was tall and lanky, poor of eyesight and blindingly pale. He pulled his thick glasses from his face and wiped the lenses clean on his Marvel t-shirt. "I say we finish these last couple boxes and follow him down." He peered up through the pine trees overhead, where the sun was beginning its slow descent into the evening. "We're a few hours from dark yet, but I want to be far from these woods when the lights go out." He shot me a knowing wink. I walked up the creaking wooden porch and pulled the thick door open. "Then stop looking at your phone every 5 minutes and help me get this shit done." I stepped inside, leaving the door to swing in the breeze. "Help me get this shit done," he repeated in a mocking tone, following me inside. "I'm just trying to get in touch with Dad. He still hasn't answered my texts." Maybe that's because we don't have any service out here. I meant since the funeral. The dude's been a total recluse since Mom died. Yeah, well, I could care less. The guy's a complete asshole anyway. I crouched down in front of a bookshelf and began pulling out dusty tomes, filling my arms with as many as I could manage. He's still our dad, Eric argued. Now that Grandma's dead, it's only a matter of time before it's just the two of us. And can we be honest? Uncle Jake's a few whiskey bottles shy from dead himself. He squatted down beside me and plucked some books from the shelf. It'd be nice not to burn every bridge in this family. Can't burn a bridge that never existed in the first place, can you? I stood up and walked to the boxes by the window, then tossed the books in carelessly, wanting to be done with this as soon as possible. The longer I spent here, the more the memories threatened to come crawling back. Do you ever think about what happened? Eric asked, coming up from behind me and gently placing his books in the box. He frowned at my disorganized mess and began restacking them neatly. No. Really? Eric didn't sound convinced. I think about it almost every day. It was horrible. I didn't say anything. Instead, I walked back to the bookshelf and grabbed another armful of books, then stomped back to the box and dumped them in. Hey, Eric said. Listen, jackass, you could at least have a little courtesy. He gestured to the books he was arranging inside, neat and tidily with their spines facing upward. One of them was called Mysteries of the Cryptids. I looked away. See the effort I'm putting in? He said. Do you really need to chuck your shit everywhere? Sorry, man, I just don't like this place. I shook my head, feeling a chill wash over me. I want to finish this and go. So do I, but don't you think talking could be good? Not really, no. I stalked toward the den. Time to put some space between me and this conversation. He grabbed my arm. Please, Matt. It was 12 years ago, but it feels like a lifetime. I don't even know if I'm remembering real events anymore or just inventing things in my head. I shrugged him off, but his expression was pleading. He needed this. You won't talk to me about it, he stammered. I have no fucking clue if what I remember even happened. With a sigh, I thunked down in my grandmother's rocking chair. It sat in front of her red brick fireplace, now filled with only the ghosts of old charred logs. I idly thought to myself that it'd probably never be used again because I planned on tearing this cabin down and leaving it for the insects. It would be better that way. I only wished I could tear down the memories with it. A week at this cabin had gifted me a decade of alcoholism, chronic depression, and a side of insomnia. It took a cocktail of prescription meds just to get me to sleep these days, and when I did, it was a coin toss whether or not I'd experience sleep paralysis. And now Eric wanted to dig those memories up? I flexed my right hand, staring at the thick scars that wound their way across it. Even now, all these years later, I could still see the blood, smell it, taste it. My heart started racing just thinking about it, and I forced myself to look away. I focused on the hearth before me, and something caught my eye. What the hell? I muttered, leaning forward. It wasn't a log, it was something much smoother. The shape was all wrong, though. I left the chair and knelt down, sifting through the ashes and burnt timber, uncovering the curious object with mounting horror. I pulled it free, brushing away flakes of ash with my fingertips. My arm quivered. Eric, I said, pushing the word from my mouth. What's up? He called. I swallowed. Is this Griff? Footsteps sounded from the other room and he came bounding in, face brimming with excitement. You found Griff? I didn't say anything. I stared at the skull in my hand, doing my best to hold back the floodgates of memories. My eyes found Eric's, and I held the skull aloft. "What the fuck?" he shouted, stumbling forward. He dropped to his knees, looking at the skull in terror. "No way that's Griff. No fucking way." He shook his head furiously. "What would he be doing in the damn fireplace, Matt?" I didn't know what to say. I knew there was no reason he should have been in the fireplace. None. No dog would willingly let itself burn to death. "Maybe it's a coyote," Eric reasoned, tripping over his words. "Grandma probably killed it and chucked it in here so the scent wouldn't attract other animals, and there's no coyotes out here, you know that." I dropped the skull, and it cracked against the solid wood floor. A shudder ran through me. "And it's way too small to be a wolf." Eric looked on the verge of tears. Griff was probably the only happy memory we had of this horrible place. "Matt, why would she do that?" 1,000 reasons crossed my mind, all of them beginning and ending with one night 12 years ago. I stood up from the fireplace, my feet feeling weak and my sense of balance waning. I fell back into the rocking chair, and it croaked a haunting welcome. "All right," I said quietly. "I think it's time to talk about what happened when we were kids."